The tarmac at Lyndon Pindling International Airport shimmered under the late afternoon sun, heat waves distorting the distant palms that fringed the Nassau terminal. 3 black SUVs idled in formation near the private aviation hangar, their windows tinted dark enough to hide whoever waited inside. A small crowd had gathered behind the chain-link fence. Airport workers, a few off-duty customs agents, and 2 reporters who'd received an anonymous tip 30 minutes earlier that something newsworthy was about to happen at the executive jet terminal. The Gulfstream G700 touched down with barely a whisper, its Rolls-Royce Pearl 700 engine spooling down as the aircraft taxied toward the waiting vehicles. The registration painted across the tail caught the sunlight. N777MC. Those who knew anything about private aviation recognized the significance of a personalized tail number. This wasn't a charter. This was ownership. The main cabin door opened, stairs deployed with hydraulic precision. Captain Linda Hartwell appeared first, her uniform crisp despite 6 hours in the cockpit, her silver hair pulled back in the same tight bun she'd worn for 3 decades of flying. She descended the stairs with the confidence of someone who'd never questioned her authority, who'd never imagined a day when the ground beneath her would crack open. She reached the tarmac and turned, expecting to supervise the passenger aplaning as she always did. Instead, she found herself face to face with a man in a charcoal suit who'd emerged from the lead SUV. He carried a leather portfolio and wore the expression of someone delivering news that couldn't be softened. Marcus Jameson Cole appeared in the aircraft doorway. He'd changed during the descent, trading the Northwestern hoodie and faded jeans for a midnight blue suit that fit like it had been cut specifically for his frame. Because it had. He moved down the stairs with unhurried purpose, and something in his bearing made Linda's practiced smile falter. The man with the portfolio spoke first, his voice carrying just far enough for the reporters to catch fragments. "Captain Hartwell, I'm David Chen, legal counsel for Coltech Aerospace. You are hereby notified that your employment with Skyalite Charter has been terminated, effective immediately. You'll surrender your company credentials, access cards, and aircraft keys." Linda's face went through a sequence of emotions, confusion, disbelief, indignation, before settling on anger. "There's been a mistake. I've flown for Skyalite for 8 years. I've never had a single incident, never failed a check ride." Marcus reached the tarmac. He didn't look at Linda immediately. Instead, he accepted a tablet from Chen and scrolled through something that made his jaw tighten. When he finally met Linda's eyes, his voice carried the kind of calm that comes from knowing every card you hold. "No mistake, Captain. I'm Marcus Cole. As of 48 hours ago, I'm the owner of Skyalite Charter. I purchased the company for $87 million, and the first order of business is addressing what you call never having a single incident." He turned the tablet toward her. The screen showed a spreadsheet with 47 rows, each one documenting a passenger complaint. Dates, names, brief descriptions. The pattern was unmistakable once you saw it laid out. Every single passenger was black. Every single incident involved removal from premium seating or denial of service. Every single resolution involved a quiet settlement paid by the previous owner, buried in quarterly financial reports under customer service adjustments. Linda's hands trembled as she tried to form words. I was following company protocol." "You wrote the protocol." Marcus's voice didn't rise, but something in it made the airport workers behind the fence go quiet. "I have the training manuals. Your signature is on page 4 under the section titled Passenger Profiling for Premium Experience Protection. Would you like me to read it aloud?" The second passenger appeared in the aircraft doorway. Devin Ashford looked like he'd aged a decade during the flight. His tailored shirt was wrinkled, his face pale, and he gripped the doorframe as if the stairs might collapse beneath him. He'd regained consciousness about 20 minutes ago, after fainting when Marcus revealed his identity mid-flight. Now he descended carefully, each step measured, avoiding eye contact with everyone. Marcus gestured toward Devon without looking at him. Mr. Ashford is also banned from Skylight Charter for life. His behavior today, demanding that I be removed from first-class seating that I'd paid for, threatening to cancel the flight unless I was relegated to crew quarters, and using language that our flight attendant Rosa Martinez documented in real time. That behavior represents everything this company will no longer tolerate. One of the reporters had worked her way closer, phone recording. Mr. Cole, are you saying this was a discrimination issue? Marcus turned to face her fully. The movement was deliberate, the kind of pivot that signals a prepared statement rather than an off-the-cuff response. I'm saying that 47 passengers over 3 years were removed from seats they'd paid for, questioned about payment methods that were never questioned for white passengers, and subjected to what the previous owner's internal documents called elevated verification procedures. Every single one of those passengers was black. The statistical probability of that being random is approximately 0. He paused, letting that sink in, then continued. I bought Skylight Charter not because I needed another company in my portfolio, but because a flight attendant named Rosa Martinez sent me documentation that the previous owner ignored. She risked her job to do the right thing. As of today, she's our new Chief Passenger Experience Officer, reporting directly to me, with full authority to investigate and resolve any discrimination complaints. Rosa appeared in the doorway, her eyes wet but her spine straight. She'd worked for Skylight for 6 years, watching the same patterns repeat, filing reports that went nowhere, collecting evidence she hoped someone would eventually care about. She descended the stairs and stood next to Marcus, and something about the way she carried herself, no longer deferential, no longer shrinking, told the story better than words could. Linda found her voice again, though it came out strangled. You can't do this. I have rights. I have a contract. Your contract includes a morality clause and an at-will employment provision. Both give me grounds for immediate termination. You'll receive 2 weeks severance, which is more generous than you deserve, and your pension contributions will be honored. But you're done flying for this company, and I'll personally ensure that every other private charter operation knows exactly why. The cameras were rolling now. Both reporters focused on capturing every word. Marcus had planned this. The timing, the location, the public nature of the termination, all of it designed to send a message that would ripple through an industry where quiet settlements and buried complaints had been the norm for too long. Devon finally spoke, his voice hoarse. I'd like to apologize. Your apology is noted and rejected. Marcus cut him off with surgical precision. You demanded that the captain remove me from a seat I'd paid for because, in your words, I didn't look like someone who belonged in first class. You threatened to tank an $80 million business deal I'm invested in unless I was moved. You called me aggressive when I politely declined to surrender my seat. None of that behavior merits forgiveness, Mr. Ashford. It merits consequences. He nodded to Chen, who produced a second document. You're also being notified that Coltech Aerospace is withdrawing support for the merger your hedge fund was pursuing. The company you were attempting to acquire? I own 34% of it. My vote is no. The deal is dead. Devon's face went from pale to gray. That merger represented 18 months of work and a fee structure that would have netted his fund $12 million. You can't. That's not related to today. You're absolutely right. It's not related. I made that decision before we took off from Teterboro, based on my assessment that your fund's due diligence was sloppy and your valuation model was overly optimistic. But I'm announcing it now because I want you to understand something. Dignity is not negotiable. The moment you decided I didn't deserve basic respect because of how I looked, you lost any claim to my professional courtesy. Marcus turned back to the reporters. Skylight Charter will be implementing immediate reforms. Every employee will undergo quarterly unconscious bias training administered by an independent third party. We're establishing a passenger advocate hotline monitored by Ms. Martinez's office, where anyone can report discrimination without fear of retaliation. We'll publish diversity metrics every 6 months, passenger demographics, complaint resolution rates, employee training compliance. And we're creating a $5 million restitution fund for the 47 passengers who were wronged over the past 3 years. He looked at Linda one last time. The saddest part, Captain, is that you're an excellent pilot. I reviewed your flight records. Your technical skills are exemplary. If you'd treated every passenger with the same professionalism you showed the wealthy white ones, you'd still have a job. Instead, you let assumptions about who belongs override your training, your ethics, and your basic humanity. That's not a mistake. That's a choice. And choices have consequences. Security personnel from the SUVs moved forward to escort Linda and Devon from the tarmac. Linda went quietly, her shoulders slumped, the full weight of her professional destruction settling in. Devon tried one more appeal, turning back toward Marcus with desperation in his eyes, but Chen stepped between them and shook his head. Some bridges, once burned, can't be rebuilt. The reporters were scouting questions now, a dozen variations on the same themes. How long had Marcus owned the company? What prompted the acquisition? Would there be lawsuits? Marcus raised a hand for quiet and got it. One more thing. My daughter is 8 years old. Her name is Maya. Last week she asked me why some people treat others badly because of skin color. I tried to explain systemic racism in terms she could understand, but the truth is, I didn't have a good answer. How do you explain to a child that people will judge her before they know her? That she'll have to work twice as hard for half the recognition? That she'll encounter Captain Hartwell and Devon Ashford's her whole life? His voice caught just for a moment, and the vulnerability in it made the reporters lower their phones slightly, recognizing they were witnessing something real. I decided I'd rather change the world my daughter inherits than explain why it's broken. That starts here, today, with accountability. It continues with the 47 families we're going to make whole, and it expands to every corner of private aviation where this behavior has been allowed to fester. If you're running a charter company, a fixed-base operation, or an aircraft management service, and you're treating passengers differently based on skin color, you're on notice. The days of quiet settlements and buried complaints are over. He handed the tablet back to Chen and walked toward the lead SUV. Rosa followed, and as they reached the vehicle, Marcus turned back one last time. Oh, and Captain Hartwell, when you're looking for your next job, remember this. 47 people sat where you put me today. 47 people endured that humiliation because you thought you knew better than their ticket receipts, their credit cards, and their basic human dignity. I hope the memory keeps you up at night. I hope it makes you a better person. But mostly, I hope you never forget that the man you tried to diminish owned the very ground you thought you stood on. The SUV door closed. The convoy pulled away. The reporters rushed to file their stories, knowing they'd just witnessed something that would dominate aviation news for weeks. And Linda Hartwell stood alone on the tarmac where she'd landed 1,000 times before, staring at the Gulf Stream that no longer needed her, wondering how 6 hours could destroy 3 decades. 6 hours earlier, Atlanta, Georgia. Marcus Cole had stood in his daughter's bedroom doorway, watching her sleep. The apartment was small, 2 bedrooms in East Point, a neighborhood in Atlanta where the rent was $825 a month, and the walls were thin enough to hear the neighbor's television. He'd lived here for 4 years, since Sarah died, since the world had narrowed to the size of making sure Maya ate breakfast and got to school and never felt the absence of her mother more than absolutely necessary. Maya's face was peaceful in sleep, one hand tucked under her cheek, the other clutching a stuffed airplane she'd named Nimbus. The gap between her front teeth would close eventually, the dentist said, but Marcus hoped it wouldn't. That gap made her smile distinctive, made it hers in a way that perfectly straight teeth never could. He'd been packed for an hour, one carry-on bag with 2 days' worth of clothes. The acquisition of Skyalite Charter required his signature on documents that couldn't be handled remotely, and the sellers had insisted on a face-to-face closing in Nassau. Marcus had considered sending his attorney, but something Rosa Martinez had written in her third email, the one that included audio recordings of Captain Hartwell instructing a gate agent to watch for passengers who don't match our brand image, had convinced him to go personally. He'd kissed Maya's forehead gently, trying not to wake her, but her eyes had fluttered open anyway. She'd inherited Sarah's ability to sense when he was leaving. "Daddy?" Her voice was thick with sleep. "Are you going flying?" "Just for 2 days, baby girl. Grandma Louise is going to stay with you." Maya had sat up, rubbing her eyes, and reached for his hand. Her fingers were small and warm and impossibly trusting. "Will you take a picture of the clouds?" "Why clouds, Maya?" "Because Mommy said she lives bigger than the sky now. I want to see where she is." The phrase had started with Sarah, during the last weeks when the cancer had made breathing difficult and every word cost her. She'd called Maya to her bedside and said, "When I'm gone, I'm not going to be in the ground, baby. I'm going to be bigger than the sky. I'm going to be in every sunrise, every star, every cloud that looks like something impossible. And when you see something beautiful up there, you'll know I'm watching." Marcus had knelt beside the bed so he was eye level with his daughter. "Bigger than the sky, Maya. That's our promise. I'll take all the pictures you want. And you'll come home?" "Always. Haven't I always come home?" She'd nodded, satisfied, and burrowed back under her blankets. Marcus had stood there for another minute, watching her settle back into sleep, feeling the weight of everything he was trying to build for her. The money meant nothing if she grew up in a world where people like Captain Hartwell made assumptions about her worth based on a glance. The success meant nothing if she couldn't walk into any room, any airplane, any opportunity without wondering if someone was measuring her against a standard that had nothing to do with her merit. Now, sitting in the back of the SUV as it navigated Nassau traffic toward his hotel, Marcus pulled out his phone and scrolled to the photos he'd taken during the flight. He'd done it from the jump seat, shooting through the small porthole window in the galley, capturing the clouds that Maya had requested. There were 27 pictures, each one showing a different formation. Cumulus towers that looked like castles, cirrus wisps that resembled brush strokes, a sunset that painted the whole sky in shades of amber and rose. He sent them to Maya with a message. "Mommy's everywhere up here. She's proud of you. I love you bigger than the sky." The response came within seconds. Grandma Louise must have been letting Maya use the tablet. "I love you bigger than the sky times infinity. Did you change the world today?" Marcus looked at Rosa, who sat across from him reviewing the implementation plan for their new policies. She'd been documenting abuse for 6 years, filing reports that went nowhere, watching good people quit because they couldn't stomach the culture. She'd risked her job, her livelihood, to contact him directly, bypassing her supervisors, betting everything that someone would finally care enough to act. He typed back, "Working on it, baby girl. One flight at a time." The real work started tomorrow, but the foundation had been laid 6 hours ago when Marcus had walked into Teterboro Airport dressed like someone who didn't matter. The test had been deliberate. The hoodie, the jeans, the scuffed sneakers, all of it designed to see whether Skyalite Charter's culture was salvageable or needed to be burned down and rebuilt from scratch. He'd arrived at the private terminal 90 minutes before departure, carrying a canvas messenger bag that had belonged to Sarah. She'd used it for her laptop when she was getting her master's degree back when they were young and broke, and convinced that hard work would be enough to overcome any obstacle. The bag was worn soft with age, the strap frayed at one end, and it looked exactly like something a graduate student or a struggling artist might carry. The woman at the check-in counter had glanced at him, then at her computer screen, then back at him with poorly concealed skepticism. "Can I help you?" "Checking in for the 11:30 flight to Nassau. Cole, Marcus." She'd typed slowly, her doubt radiating across the desk. "And you're traveling on business?" The question itself was neutral. The tone was not. It carried the subtext of every assumption Marcus had learned to navigate. The subtle suggestion that his presence in a private aviation terminal required additional verification, additional proof, additional justification that white passengers never had to provide. Yes. He'd offered nothing else, waiting to see how far she'd push. "I'll need to see your credit card, the one used for booking." Marcus had handed over his American Express Centurion card, the one that requires a net worth north of $10 million to obtain. The woman's eyes had widened slightly when she saw it, but she'd swiped it anyway, running a verification that she hadn't run for the 3 passengers who'd checked in before him. All white, all waved through with minimal questions. "And do you have a copy of the booking confirmation?" "I emailed it to myself. Would you like me to pull it up?" "Please." He'd gone through the motions, showing her an email that she'd already verified through her system, watching her look for some reason to question his legitimacy. When she'd finally printed his boarding documents, her smile had been tight. "You're in seat 2A, first-class cabin. Boarding begins in 45 minutes. Marcus had thanked her and moved toward the departure lounge, filing the interaction away as data point number 48. Rosa had warned him that the rot extended beyond the aircraft, into ground operations, into the culture of who was welcomed and who was scrutinized. Seeing it firsthand confirmed that cosmetic changes wouldn't be enough. The whole ecosystem needed restructuring. The Gulfstream G700 sat on the tarmac like a promise, its midnight blue paint scheme catching the morning light. Marcus had reviewed the specifications when his team was conducting due diligence on Skylight Charter. Range of 7,500 nautical miles, cruise speed of Mach .925, cabin altitude of 4,800 feet at maximum cruise altitude. It was, objectively, one of the finest private aircraft ever built. What the specifications didn't capture was how it felt to approach that aircraft knowing it belonged to you, knowing that every rivet and wire and precision-machined component was yours to command, and then choosing to board it dressed like you couldn't afford a ticket on a regional puddle jumper. The cognitive dissonance was intentional. Marcus needed to experience what Rosa's documentation described, needed to feel the weight of assumptions in real time. Rosa had been waiting near the aircraft stairs, her flight attendant uniform impeccable, her eyes meeting his with recognition that she'd masked instantly. They'd communicated electronically for months, but this was their first face-to-face meeting. She'd greeted him with professional warmth that gave nothing away. "Good morning, sir. Welcome aboard. May I help you with your bag?" "I've got it, thank you." He'd climbed the stairs and stepped into the cabin, and the sheer opulence of it had hit him again. Cream leather seats, burled walnut trim, gold-plated fixtures, the scent of expensive materials and careful maintenance. He'd moved toward seat 2A, the forward-facing position that airline designers call the throne seat, because of its commanding view and status signaling. He'd just settled in when the cockpit door opened and Captain Linda Hartwell emerged for her pre-flight walkthrough. She was 62 years old according to her personnel file, with 34 years of flying experience and a safety record that was genuinely impressive. She'd started in regional airlines, worked her way up to major carriers, and then transitioned to private aviation, where the pay was comparable but the prestige was higher. Her technical skills were beyond reproach. Her eyes had landed on Marcus and stayed there, and he'd watched her assessment happen in real time. The catalog of his appearance, the instant conclusion. the decision forming before she'd spoken a word. She'd approached with the kind of smile that doesn't reach the eyes. "Excuse me, sir. I'm Captain Hartwell. I'll be flying you to Nassau today." Marcus had nodded. "Looking forward to it. I notice you're seated in 2A. I just want to confirm. Are you traveling alone? Or are you expecting someone to join you?" The question was invasive in ways that passengers in hoodies shouldn't have to parse, but Marcus had experience with the dance. "Alone. Is there a problem with my seating?" "Oh, no problem at all. I just want to make sure everyone's comfortable." Sometimes, when passengers book through third-party services, there can be confusion about cabin assignments. I booked directly through Skylight's website, used my Centurion card. Everything should be in order. Linda's smile had tightened. "Of course. Well, we'll be departing shortly. Can I get you anything before we close the cabin door?" "I'm fine, thank you." She'd retreated to the cockpit, but Marcus had seen her pause at the threshold and glance back, her expression troubled in a way that confirmed what Rosa's documentation had described. Linda Hartwell wasn't malicious in the way Devon Ashford would prove to be. She'd genuinely convinced herself that her assumptions served passenger comfort, that protecting what she called the premium experience justified her snap judgments about who belonged in which seat. The self-deception was almost worse than outright bigotry because it was harder to confront, harder to root out. Linda believed herself to be a good person. She probably recycled and tipped well and sent birthday cards to her nieces. But she'd spent 3 decades absorbing industry culture that taught her to see black passengers as statistical anomalies in first class, as people whose presence required explanation, as potential threats to the carefully curated environment that justified premium pricing. Devon Ashford had boarded 12 minutes later, trailing an assistant who carried 3 bags and an air of exhausted resignation. Devon was 38, managing partner at a hedge fund that specialized in distressed assets, and worth approximately $40 million according to the background check Marcus's team had run. He wore a Tom Ford suit that probably cost $6,000 and an Audemars Piguet watch that definitely cost $75,000. He was exactly the kind of passenger Linda Hartwell never questioned. Devon had stopped when he saw Marcus, his gaze traveling from the hoodie to the messenger bag, to the face that didn't match whatever expectation he'd built. His eyes had narrowed. "Captain Hartwell?" His voice carried to the cockpit. "Could you come out here for a moment?" Linda had emerged immediately, her deference to Devon obvious in her posture. "Yes, Mr. Ashford, how can I help?" Devon had gestured toward Marcus without looking at him directly. "I believe there's been a seating error. I was under the impression this flight was exclusively chartered." "It is, sir. You're the primary passenger, but Skylight does occasionally add passengers to partially filled flights to optimize aircraft utilization. I assure you, everyone aboard has been properly vetted." Vetted. Devon had let the word hang there, loaded with implication. "I'm heading to Nassau to close an $80 million deal. I need this flight to be confidential. I can't have additional parties potentially overhearing sensitive business discussions." Marcus had watched the dance, fascinated by how neither of them would say directly what they meant, that his presence was unexpected, unwanted, presumed to be lesser. Linda had glanced at Marcus, her internal calculation visible in the pause before she spoke. "I understand your concern, Mr. Ashford. Let me see what I can arrange." She'd approached Marcus with a different energy now, her professional courtesy giving way to something harder. "Sir, I apologize, but we have a situation. Mr. Ashford has chartered this aircraft for business purposes, and he's requested additional privacy. Would you be willing to move to a different seat?" Marcus had let the question sit for a moment, watching her discomfort grow. "I paid for seat 2A. My ticket confirms first-class seating. Why would I move?" "It would just be for the duration of the flight. We have other seats available." "I'm aware. I chose this seat specifically. I'm not moving unless you can provide a valid reason why my paid seating assignment should be changed to accommodate another passenger's preferences." Linda's jaw had tightened. "Sir, I'm trying to find a solution that works for everyone. Then tell Mr. Ashford he can use headphones if he's concerned about confidentiality, or he can move to a different seat. But I'm staying where I am." Devon had stepped forward then, abandoning the pretense of speaking through Linda. "Look, I don't know who you are or how you ended up on this flight, but I'm paying $28,000 for this charter. I think that entitles me to basic privacy. I'm paying for my seat, too. Your charter fee doesn't include the right to remove other passengers. Are you being deliberately difficult?" Devon's voice had risen, the entitled indignation of someone unused to resistance. "Do you have any idea who I am?" Marcus had met his eyes directly. "I know exactly who you are, Mr. Ashford. The question is whether you know who I am." The statement had landed oddly, creating a moment of uncertainty where Devon had glanced at Linda as if she might provide context. Linda had intervened again, her patience clearly fraying. "Gentlemen, we need to resolve this quickly. We have a departure slot to make." She'd turned to Marcus with something approaching a command. "Sir, I'm going to have to insist you relocate. There's a crew jump seat in the galley that you can use for the flight. It's FAA approved and perfectly safe." Marcus had known this moment was coming. Rosa's documentation had predicted it almost precisely. The jump seat was where they put the passengers they wanted out of sight, the ones whose presence disrupted the carefully maintained fiction of who belonged in premium spaces. It was cramped, uncomfortable, degrading by design, even as it was technically legal. He'd stood slowly, gathering his messenger bag, and watched relief flood Linda's face. She'd thought he was capitulating. She'd thought the system was working as designed. "I'll move," Marcus had said quietly, letting each word carry weight. "But I want you both to remember something. I gave you a choice today. I offered you the opportunity to treat me with basic dignity, to honor the ticket I paid for, to see me as a human being rather than a problem to solve. You chose wrong. And when we land in Nassau, you're going to understand exactly how wrong." Linda had nodded, missing the warning entirely, already moving to help Devon with his bags. Devon had smirked, settling into seat 2A like he was reclaiming territory that had been temporarily occupied by an interloper. Marcus had walked to the galley, feeling their eyes on his back, feeling the weight of 47 other passengers who'd made this same walk because someone had decided they didn't belong. The jump seat was exactly as bad as described, a fold-down bench with minimal padding, positioned against the galley bulkhead where the engine noise was loudest and the air circulation was poorest. Rosa had helped him buckle in, her hands shaking slightly, her whispered apology cut short by Marcus's gentle headshake. "Document everything," he'd mouthed, and she'd nodded, understanding that this humiliation had purpose, that every minute he spent in this seat was evidence being gathered, ammunition being stockpiled for the reckoning that would come at wheels down. The flight had lasted 6 hours and 42 minutes. Marcus had spent it reviewing Rosa's files on his phone, cross-referencing the 47 documented incidents with financial records that showed systematic settlement payments. The pattern was clear. Skylight's previous owner had known about the discrimination, had quantified it, and had decided it was cheaper to pay settlements than to fix the culture. That calculation was about to get very expensive. The hotel suite overlooked Nassau Harbor, but Marcus barely registered the view. He'd changed into running clothes and completed 5 miles on the treadmill in the fitness center, trying to work out the tension that had coiled in his shoulders during 6 hours on that jump seat. The physical discomfort had faded. The memory of how it felt to be dismissed, minimized, rendered invisible, that lingered like smoke in his lungs. His phone buzzed with an incoming video call. Maya's face filled the screen, gap-toothed smile already in place, and something in Marcus's chest loosened. "Daddy! Grandma Louise says you're in the Bahamas. Can you see the ocean?" Marcus angled the phone so she could see the window behind him, the turquoise water stretching toward the horizon. Right there, baby girl. It's beautiful. Did Mommy see it too? From up in the clouds? The question hit harder than it should have. Marcus had spent the day dismantling careers and restructuring a company, wielding power with surgical precision, but his 8-year-old daughter could still crack his composure with a single earnest query about whether Sarah's spirit had witnessed the same ocean. I think she saw everything today, Maya. I think she was watching the whole time. Maya's expression turned serious, the way it did when she was processing something complex. Grandma Louise showed me a video on the internet. Some people were saying mean things about you. About the airplane. Marcus's jaw tightened. He'd anticipated media coverage, but he hadn't expected it to reach Maya this quickly. Louise should have filtered that, should have protected her from the ugliness that always accompanied public confrontation. What kind of mean things? They said you were lying, that you didn't really own the airplane, that you were trying to get attention. Maya's voice wavered. But you don't lie, Daddy. You always tell me lying is worse than getting in trouble. Marcus sat on the edge of the bed, wishing he could reach through the screen and hold her. I'm not lying, baby. I do own that airplane. I own the whole company that operates it. Some people just don't like being told they did something wrong, so they make up stories to feel better about themselves. Like when Tyler said I cheated on the math test because I got a better score than him. The comparison was apt in ways that made Marcus's throat tight. Tyler was a classmate who'd spent 3rd grade convinced that Maya's success must be fraudulent because his worldview couldn't accommodate a black girl outperforming him legitimately. Exactly like that. Remember what we said about Tyler? That his problem is his problem, not mine. That I should keep being excellent and let my work speak for itself. That's right. And that's what I'm doing too. I'm going to make sure this company treats every passenger with respect, and the people who don't like that can say whatever they want. The truth doesn't need their approval. Maya nodded, satisfied, but then her expression shifted to something more vulnerable. Daddy, when you were on the airplane today, did people treat you mean because you're black? Like what happened to me at the toy store? Marcus closed his eyes briefly. The toy store incident, 3 months ago, a clerk following Maya through the aisles because an 8-year-old black girl with birthday money must be shoplifting. She'd learned the same lesson he was teaching Devin now. The world judges first, asks questions later. Yes, Marcus admitted, because lying to her about this felt more dangerous than the truth. Some people looked at me and made assumptions. They decided I didn't belong somewhere before they knew anything about me. And instead of checking their assumptions, they treated me badly. That's not fair. No, it's not. But here's what I want you to understand, Maya. When that happens to you, and it will happen again, baby girl, I wish I could say otherwise, but I can't. You have choices. You can get angry, which is valid. You can get sad, which is also valid. Or you can get strategic. Maya leaned closer to the screen, her science-oriented mind engaged by the concept of strategy. What does strategic mean? It means you think about the long game. You document what happened. You gather evidence. You build a case so strong that when you're ready to act, nobody can deny the truth. That's what I did today. I spent 6 hours in a seat I didn't deserve to be in, but I was collecting proof the whole time. And now I can make changes that will help people for years to come. Like the 47 other people? Marcus felt a surge of pride that she'd been paying attention, that she'd retained that number from whatever news coverage she'd seen. Exactly like them. They all deserved better. Now they're going to get it. Maya was quiet for a moment, her expression thoughtful in a way that reminded Marcus so much of Sarah it hurt. Sarah had processed information the same way, absorbing it, turning it over, examining it from multiple angles before responding. I think Mommy would be proud of you today. The statement landed with unexpected force, knocking something loose in Marcus's careful composure. He'd spent the day being strong, being calculated, being the kind of billionaire who could dismantle institutional racism with the stroke of a pen. But his daughter's simple declaration of maternal approval threatened to undo him completely. "I hope so, baby. I'm trying to be the kind of man she believed I could be." "You are. You're bigger than the sky, Daddy. Just like you promised." They talked for another 10 minutes about school, about the science project Maya was planning, about whether they could visit the ocean together sometime. When they finally disconnected, Marcus sat in the darkening suite and let himself feel everything he'd compartmentalized during the confrontation on the tarmac. The anger was still there, banked but burning. The exhaustion was deeper than physical. The weight of knowing that 47 people had endured similar humiliation, or worse, because the previous owner of Skylight had decided settlements were an acceptable cost of doing business. His phone buzzed again. David Chen this time, his attorney, with a legal brief that required review before morning. Marcus opened the document and began reading, but his mind kept drifting to the question Maya had asked. "Did people treat you mean because you're black?" The answer was yes, but the mechanism was more complex than simple meanness. Linda Hartwell probably didn't think of herself as racist. She probably had black friends, probably believed in equality as an abstract principle, but she'd internalized a set of assumptions about who belonged in premium spaces, and those assumptions mapped perfectly onto racial lines even if she never acknowledged it consciously. Devin Ashford was different. His prejudice was more overt, more rooted in the belief that money entitled him to control his environment, including the people in it. He'd seen Marcus as an obstruction to his comfort, something to be moved or removed, and he'd wielded his wealth like a weapon without considering that the man he was trying to diminish might have more of it. The irony would have been funny if it weren't so emblematic of the problem. Devin had assumed poverty from appearance. Linda had assumed inadequacy from skin color. Both had made decisions that felt rational to them in the moment, and both had missed the signals that should have warned them they were catastrophically wrong. Marcus finished reviewing the legal brief and responded to Chen with minor edits. Then he pulled up the spreadsheet Rosa had compiled. 47 rows of documented discrimination, each one representing a person who'd paid for a service and received degradation instead. He started reading them in detail, one by one. Entry 14. Angela Davis, 34, accountant from Baltimore. Removed from first class on a flight to Miami because the gate agent couldn't verify her payment method, despite having a valid credit card and printed confirmation. The agent had verified payment for 3 white passengers before and after Angela without issue. Angela had filed a complaint. The previous owner had settled for $62,000 and buried the incident in quarterly financials. Entry 23. Terrell Johnson, 41, software engineer from Seattle. Questioned repeatedly about whether he understood the cost of his ticket on a flight to Los Angeles. Made to show his credit card 3 times. Eventually allowed to board but seated in a middle seat in coach despite having purchased business class. He'd complained. The response had been a voucher for a future flight and a non-apology about miscommunication. No settlement because Terrell had accepted the voucher, not realizing it was a tactic to avoid legal liability. Entry 31. Simone Baptiste, 29, medical resident from Houston. Told her Medicaid card, which she'd presented as government ID, not payment, indicated she probably couldn't afford the charter flight she'd already paid for. The flight attendant had suggested she might be more comfortable on a commercial flight. Simone had produced her bank statement showing a balance of $200,000. The flight attendant had apologized, but the damage was done. Simone had filed a complaint. Settlement. $48,000. Marcus read through all 47 entries, forcing himself to absorb the details, to see the pattern not as statistics but as individuals. Each one had paid money for a service. Each one had been subjected to additional scrutiny that white passengers escaped. Each one had been offered settlements that implied the company knew its behavior was wrong, but preferred to pay for silence rather than change the culture. The financial analysis was straightforward. The previous owner had paid out approximately $2.8 million over 3 years in discrimination settlements. That averaged to $933,000 annually, a line item labeled customer service adjustments that board members had approved without apparently asking why customer service required $1 million in annual adjustments. Marcus had built his fortune on aerospace engineering, designing propulsion systems that were more efficient than anything the industry had seen. He understood systems thinking, understood how small inefficiencies could compound into massive waste. The discrimination problem at Skylight was the same principle in reverse, small acts of bigotry compounding into institutional rot that cost money, lost customers, and corroded the company's ethical foundation. His phone buzzed. Rosa Martinez calling. "Mr. Cole, I hope I'm not disturbing you." Marcus glanced at the clock. "Nearly 11 p.m. "You're not. What's happening?" Rosa's voice carried a tremor that hadn't been there during their conversations on the tarmac. "I've been getting calls. Other flight attendants, ground crew, people I've worked with for years. Some of them are thanking me. Some of them are not." "What are the not thanking ones saying?" "That I betrayed the company. That I should have handled things internally instead of going to you. That I've made everyone's job harder by creating all this scrutiny." She paused, and Marcus could hear her breathing carefully, fighting for composure. "One of them called me a race traitor." Marcus felt the anger spike again, hot and immediate. "A race traitor, because you reported discrimination against black passengers. She's Latina, like me. She said I should understand that sometimes we have to accept how things are to protect our jobs. That making waves just makes it harder for all of us." The argument was depressingly familiar. The notion that accepting injustice was somehow more pragmatic than fighting it. That challenging the system endangered everyone rather than just those doing the challenging. It was how institutional problems persisted, by convincing the people suffering from them that speaking up was selfish. "Rosa, listen carefully. What you did took courage. You documented abuse for years, risked your job to contact me, provided evidence that made today possible. 47 people are getting justice because you refused to accept how things are." Marcus paused. "The people calling you a traitor are scared. They're scared their own compromises will be examined next. Let them be scared. Fear means change is happening." Rosa's breath hitched. "I keep thinking about Captain Hartwell's face when you fired her. She looked destroyed. She should be destroyed. She destroyed other people first, repeatedly, systematically. The difference is that her victims didn't have power, and she did. Now the equation is balanced. Do you think she'll change? Do you think this will make her a better person?" Marcus considered the question seriously. He'd spent the flight back to Nassau thinking about redemption arcs, about whether people like Linda Hartwell could genuinely transform, or whether their worldview was too calcified. "Honestly, I don't know. Some people experience consequences and learn from them. Some people just get bitter and blame everyone but themselves. What I do know is that her personal growth isn't my responsibility. My responsibility is making sure she can't hurt anyone else the way she hurt those 47 passengers. Whether she learns from that is up to her." That feels harsh. It is harsh. So was making people sit in crew quarters for 6 hours because their skin color made her uncomfortable. "Rosa, you can't fix broken people by being nice to them. You can set boundaries. You can enforce consequences. You can remove their ability to cause harm. But you can't make them see their own bigotry if they've convinced themselves it's justified." Rosa was quiet for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice was steadier. "The other calls. the thank you calls. Those were from black flight attendants mostly, people who've been documenting their own experiences. They want to know if the reforms are real, if you're serious about changing the culture, or if this is just good PR. It's real. Tomorrow morning, we're announcing the full reform package. Every employee gets notification of the new policies. Training starts next month, mandatory quarterly sessions. The Passenger Advocate Hotline goes live next week with your office handling oversight. And we're hiring an independent auditor to review every complaint filed in the past 5 years, not just the 47 we already documented. That's going to uncover a lot more than 47 cases. Good. I want to know the full scope. I want to understand every way this company failed people. And then I want to make sure it never happens again. Rosa exhaled slowly. I've worked in aviation for 18 years, Mr. Cole. I've never seen ownership that cared about this. The usual response is to make problems go away quietly, to pay settlements and move on. You're doing the opposite. You're making noise. You're inviting scrutiny. It's terrifying and exhilarating at the same time. Marcus thought about Maya's question, about what strategic looked like, about building cases so strong that nobody could deny the truth. Quiet fixes don't fix systems, Rosa. They just postpone the reckoning. I'd rather burn it all down now and rebuild properly than patch over the rot and pretend it's healed. They talked through the implementation timeline, the training curriculum, the metrics they'd track to measure cultural change. Rosa had ideas, good ones, about peer accountability systems and passenger feedback loops. Marcus found himself grateful that his first major decision as owner had been promoting her. She understood the problem from the inside in ways that consultants never could. After they disconnected, Marcus opened his laptop and started drafting the company-wide announcement that would go out at 8 a.m. Eastern Time. The tone needed to be clear without being punitive to employees who hadn't actively participated in discrimination. It needed to establish new expectations without making people defensive. It needed to signal that change was happening, whether people liked it or not. He wrote 3 drafts before landing on language that felt right. To all Skyalite charter employees, as of this week, I am the new owner of this company. My name is Marcus Cole, and I acquired Skyalite because I believe private aviation should represent the highest standards of service, safety, and human dignity. Over the past 3 years, this company has failed that standard in ways that are documented, systematic, and unacceptable. 47 passengers were subjected to discrimination based on their race. They were questioned about payment methods never questioned for white passengers. They were removed from seats they'd paid for. They were treated as problems to solve rather than customers to serve. This ends now. The announcement continued with specifics about training, the passenger advocate system, the independent audit, and the $5 million restitution fund. Marcus included his personal email at the bottom with an invitation for employees to share concerns or observations directly. He knew it would create turbulence. Some employees would resist, would argue that the old ways were fine, would resent being told their behavior needed correction. Others would see the announcement as vindication, as proof that their complaints hadn't been ignored even if they'd been buried. The company would split along those lines initially, and Marcus's job would be to make clear which side would prevail. His phone buzzed again. This time it was a news alert. CNN had picked up the story, running a segment titled "Billionaire Goes Undercover to Expose Aviation Discrimination." The clip showed footage from the Nassau tarmac. Marcus's face, Linda Hartwell's shock, Devin Ashford being escorted away. The anchor's commentary was mostly accurate, though she'd gotten Marcus's net worth wrong, inflating it to $5 billion instead of $3.2. The comments section beneath the article was predictably divided. Half the readers praised Marcus's approach, called it accountability in action, shared their own stories of discrimination in premium travel spaces. The other half accused him of staging the incident for publicity, questioned whether he really owned the company, suggested that Linda Hartwell's firing was an overreaction to a simple misunderstanding. Marcus closed the browser without reading further. He'd learned years ago that public opinion was a lagging indicator of cultural change, not a leading one. The people defending Linda would continue defending her until defending her became socially costly. Then they'd claim they'd always known she was wrong, that they'd always supported reform, that they'd been on the right side of history all along. The work wasn't persuading those people. The work was building systems that functioned regardless of their support. He slept 4 hours, fitful dreams about jump seats and closed doors, and Maya asking questions he couldn't answer. When he woke at 6 a.m., there were 217 new emails, 43 text messages, and 6 voicemails. The story had gone viral overnight. Marcus showered, dressed in a charcoal suit that was less aggressive than the midnight blue from yesterday, and went down to the hotel restaurant for breakfast. He'd just sat down when David Chen appeared, looking like he hadn't slept at all. "We need to talk about the legal exposure." Marcus gestured to the empty chair. "Sit. Talk." Chen pulled out his laptop, already queuing up documents. Devin Ashford's attorneys sent a demand letter at 3 a.m. They're threatening to sue for defamation, claiming you falsely accused him of racism to justify killing his merger deal. The merger died because the target company is overvalued and the due diligence was sloppy. I explained that yesterday. His lawyers are arguing that you manufactured a discrimination incident to create pretext for torpedoing a deal you opposed for business reasons. They want a public apology and $10 million in damages. Marcus sipped his coffee, genuinely unbothered. "Tell them no." "They have resources, Marcus. Ashford's fund can afford to drag this out for years." "So can I. And unlike Devin, I have documentation. Rosa Martinez recorded the entire interaction on the aircraft. We have his exact words, his tone, his body language. We have my ticket receipt showing I paid for seat 2A. We have the email trail showing Linda Hartwell's decision to move me was based on his complaint, not any legitimate operational reason. If Devin wants to go to discovery, I'll bury him in evidence." Chen made a note. "I'll draft a response. What about Captain Hartwell? She hasn't lawyered up yet, but it's probably coming." "Let it come. I terminated her for cause based on documented pattern of discrimination. Her personnel file includes the training manual she authored, the one with the passenger profiling section. I have witness statements from Rosa and 4 other flight attendants describing her instructions to verify black passengers more rigorously. Unless she wants all of that presented in open court, she should take her severance and move on. You're assuming she'll be rational about this. Terminated employees often aren't." Marcus understood Chen's caution. His attorney was paid to anticipate worst-case scenarios, to see legal liability in every decision. But Marcus had learned something during his years building Coltech Aerospace. Bold moves attracted criticism and litigation in roughly equal measure. The key was making sure your position was defensible when challenged. If Linda sues, we'll defend. If Devin sues, we'll defend. If anyone else wants to test whether I'm serious about accountability, they can file their complaint and find out. I'm not backing down, David. This is the hill." Chen closed his laptop with a sigh that suggested he'd expected this response. "All right. I'll prepare for litigation. But for the record, the easier path would have been firing Linda quietly, paying Devin to go away, and avoiding the media circus. The easier path perpetuates the problem. 47 people took the easier path. They accepted settlements and signed NDAs and let Skylight continue operating exactly as before. I'm not interested in easy. I'm interested in change." They discussed logistics for another 20 minutes, timeline for the restitution fund, structure for the independent audit, HR procedures for handling employees who refused to comply with new policies. Chen left to file responses to the demand letters, and Marcus returned to his suite to prepare for a conference call with his executive team at Coltech. Running 2 companies simultaneously wasn't sustainable long-term, but for now, it was necessary. Skyalite needed hands-on leadership during the transition, and Coltech needed assurance that Marcus wasn't neglecting the business that had made him a billionaire. The call covered quarterly earnings, a new Defense Department contract, and production delays on a satellite propulsion system that was proving more complex than anticipated. Marcus handled it all with the same focused attention he brought to everything, but part of his mind was already back at Skyalite, thinking about the 47 cases, about the employees who'd called Rosa a traitor, about the cultural transformation that would take years to fully implement. His phone buzzed during a lull in the Coltech discussion. A text from an unknown number, just 4 words. "You don't know me." Marcus frowned, typed back, "Who is this?" The response came immediately. "Passenger number 38. You read about me this morning. I need to talk to you." Marcus scrolled back through Rosa's spreadsheet, found entry 38. Devin Crawford, 26, graduate student in physics from Boston. Removed from business class on a flight to Atlanta because the captain had concerns about his documentation. Devin had been traveling on a student visa, and the captain had decided that made him a security risk despite TSA clearance and valid travel papers. No settlement because Devin hadn't known he could file a complaint. Marcus texted, "When and where?" "I'm in Atlanta. Can you meet me when you get back?" "I'm returning tomorrow afternoon. Where do you want to meet?" "Someplace public. I don't know if I trust this yet." Marcus understood the hesitation. Devin had been burned by the system once already. Trusting that the system's new owner was different required a leap of faith that might feel impossible. "How about the Coltech campus in Marietta? 3 p.m. tomorrow. I'll have security clear you at the gate. Bring whatever questions you need answered." There was a long pause before the response. "Okay, but if this is some kind of PR stunt, I'm walking out." "Fair enough. See you tomorrow." Marcus returned his attention to the Coltech call, but his mind kept circling back to Devin Crawford. Entry 38. No settlement because he hadn't known to fight back. How many others were there? Passengers who'd been mistreated but hadn't filed complaints, who'd accepted the discrimination as normal, who'd never realized they had recourse. The independent audit would uncover some of them, but the real number was probably unknowable, lost in the gap between what got reported and what got endured in silence. The call ended. Marcus spent the rest of the morning in meetings with Skyalite's senior staff, most of whom were still processing what had happened on the Nassau tarmac. The director of operations, a man named Gerald Foster, who'd worked for the company since its founding, sat across from Marcus with barely concealed hostility. "You fired our best captain. You've created a media firestorm. You've announced reforms that are going to cost millions to implement, all because of one incident." Marcus leaned back in his chair, studying Gerald's face. The man was 61, white, successful by any conventional measure. He'd built Skyalite from 3 aircraft to 27, had overseen expansion into international routes, had delivered consistent profitability for investors. He was also, based on Rosa's documentation, the person who'd approved Linda Hartwell's training manual on passenger profiling. One incident that I experienced personally, 47 incidents that are documented, an unknown number of additional incidents that passengers didn't report. This isn't about one bad day, Gerald. This is about a pattern. We run a premium service. Part of maintaining that premium is ensuring passengers fit the brand image. Stop! Marcus's voice cut through the corporate euphemism like a blade. Let's be very clear about what you're saying. You're arguing that black passengers damage the brand image, that their presence in premium cabins needs to be scrutinized, questioned, potentially removed. That's not brand management. That's racism with a marketing degree. Gerald's face flushed. That's not what I meant. Then what did you mean? Explain to me how Linda Hartwell's training manual, which you approved, isn't explicitly designed to target passengers based on race. It's about economics. We've found that certain demographics are more likely to dispute charges, to file complaints, to create operational issues. Show me the data. Gerald blinked. What? You're claiming this is about economics and operational efficiency. Show me the data that supports that claim. Show me evidence that black passengers dispute charges at higher rates than white passengers. Show me complaint statistics broken down by race. Show me anything empirical that justifies the profiling you've institutionalized. Gerald's silence was answer enough. There was no data because the premise was false. The profiling existed because people like Gerald had absorbed cultural assumptions about who belonged in premium spaces and had built policies to enforce those assumptions without ever examining whether they were accurate. Marcus stood. You're fired, Gerald, effective immediately. Your severance will be 2 weeks' pay, which is generous given that you've presided over systematic discrimination for years. I want you out of the building by end of business today. You can't do this. I have a contract. Your contract includes a clause allowing termination for cause. Creating and implementing discriminatory policies constitutes cause. If you want to dispute this, you can file a lawsuit and we'll present every email you sent approving Linda's training program, every settlement you authorized, every complaint you buried. Your choice. Gerald stood, his face now pale with shock rather than red with indignation. He walked to the door, paused, turned back. This company was fine before you showed up. We had profits. We had happy customers. You had comfortable customers, Marcus corrected. Specifically, comfortable white customers who enjoyed a service environment that made them feel superior. You built an entire business model around catering to that feeling, and you sacrificed the dignity of paying passengers to maintain it. That version of the company is dead. What comes next will be better. After Gerald left, Marcus spent 20 minutes on the phone with HR, explaining the termination, ensuring the documentation was airtight. Then he reviewed candidates for Gerald's replacement, internal options who'd been passed over for promotion, external recruits who might bring fresh perspective. Rosa knocked on the open office door. Mr. Cole, there's someone here to see you. She doesn't have an appointment, but she says it's urgent. Who is it? Angela Davis, entry 14. Marcus felt something shift in his chest. Angela Davis, the accountant from Baltimore, the one who'd been removed from first class because a gate agent couldn't verify her payment despite having valid documentation. She'd accepted a $62,000 settlement 3 years ago. What was she doing at Skylight headquarters in Atlanta? Send her in. Angela was smaller than Marcus had imagined, maybe 5'4", wearing a business suit that looked slightly too large for her frame. Her eyes were intelligent and wary, and she carried a leather folder that she clutched like armor. Mr. Cole, thank you for seeing me without notice. Marcus gestured to a chair. Of course. What brings you here? Angela sat carefully, placed the folder on the desk between them, but didn't open it yet. I saw the news yesterday. I saw what you did to Captain Hartwell and that hedge fund manager. I saw you talking about the 47 cases. She paused, working up to something. I was case 14. I know. I read your file this morning. Then you know I signed an NDA. I took their settlement money and agreed never to speak publicly about what happened. Marcus nodded. The NDA is void. I'm nullifying all 47 agreements as part of the reform package. You're free to speak. Angela's eyes widened. You can do that? I own the company. I can release you from any agreement the previous owner made, especially agreements designed to hide wrongdoing. Consider yourself released. She opened the folder with shaking hands. Inside were documents, printed emails, photographs, handwritten notes. I've been keeping records, everything that happened during my incident and everything I learned afterward. I wanted to come forward years ago, but the NDA scared me. I thought if I violated it, they'd sue me for the settlement money plus damages. You don't have to worry about that anymore. What's in the folder? Angela pulled out a photograph. It showed a gate agent, white woman, maybe 45, speaking to a younger black woman who Marcus assumed was Angela from 3 years ago. The gate agent's body language was aggressive, leaning into Angela's space, finger pointed at her chest. "This is Karen Mitchell. She's the one who flagged my payment. She told me my credit card looked suspicious, even though it was a standard Visa with my name embossed on it. She made me show her my driver's license, my bank statement, even my employee ID from work. Then she said she needed to verify with corporate before allowing me to board." "How long did the verification take?" 45 minutes. I almost missed the flight. And when she finally cleared me, she acted like she was doing me a favor. No apology. No acknowledgement that she'd subjected me to scrutiny she didn't apply to anyone else. Angela pulled out more documents, emails she'd sent to Skylight's customer service, responses that offered vouchers instead of accountability, a settlement offer that arrived 6 weeks later with the NDA attached. I took the money because I needed it. I had student loans, rent, medical bills from my mom's cancer treatment. $62,000 felt like too much to turn down. Marcus studied the documents, seeing the machinery of institutional cover-up laid bare. You shouldn't have had to choose between justice and financial stability. But I did, and I've felt sick about it for 3 years. Every time I fly, I wonder if the person next to me knows what happened, if they think I'm the problem for making a fuss instead of the company being the problem for treating me that way. Angela's voice cracked. "I thought I was the only one. I thought it was just bad luck, one racist gate agent on one bad day. Then I saw your press conference talking about 47 cases, and I realized I was part of a pattern." Marcus understood what she was asking for, what drove her to show up unannounced with a folder of evidence she'd been carrying for 3 years. "You want to know you weren't crazy. You want validation that it really happened the way you remember it." "Yes." The word came out as a whisper. "It happened. It was real. It was wrong. And you weren't the only one, which makes it worse, not better." Karen Mitchell flagged 13 black passengers over 2 years, always with the same suspicious payment excuse. The company knew. They saw the pattern. They chose settlements over discipline. Angela cried then, quiet tears that she wiped away quickly, like she'd had years of practice hiding emotional responses to indignities that should never have been routine. Marcus waited, offering tissues from a box on his desk, giving her space to process what validation felt like after years of doubt. When she'd composed herself, she looked at him directly. "What happens now? To people like me, I mean. The 47. You get the settlement money back, plus interest. You get a formal apology in writing, signed by me personally. You get the satisfaction of knowing that the people who hurt you faced consequences. Linda Hartwell is fired. Gerald Foster is fired. Karen Mitchell will be terminated by end of day tomorrow. And you get to decide whether you ever want to fly Skylight again, with the promise that if you do, you'll be treated the way you should have been treated 3 years ago." Angela touched the photograph of Karen Mitchell, her expression hardening. "I want to testify. When you do the independent audit, when you're investigating the full scope of what happened, I want to tell my story on the record. Not for money, for documentation. So that 50 years from now, when people wonder whether discrimination was really that bad in 2025, there's evidence that yes, it was this bad, and yes, it took this long to fix." Marcus felt something fierce and proud rising in his chest. This was what justice looked like when it wasn't transactional, when it moved beyond settlements and into truth-telling. "We'll make that happen. I promise." They talked for another hour. Angela shared details that hadn't made it into the original incident report, the way other passengers had stared, the whispers she'd overheard about whether she'd stolen someone's ticket, the gate agent's smirk when the flight finally boarded and Angela had to walk past her one more time. Each revelation built the case not just against individual employees, but against the culture that had enabled them. When Angela finally left, promising to return for the formal testimony, Marcus sat alone in the office and felt the weight of what he'd undertaken. 47 cases. 47 people carrying stories like Angela's, wounds that money had covered but not healed, and beyond them, the unknown number who'd never reported, never complained, never believed the system would care. His phone buzzed. Maya, sending a picture she'd drawn, stick figure daddy with wings, stick figure her with a smile, both of them standing on top of a cloud labeled bigger than the sky. The caption read, "You're my hero." Marcus saved the image, made it his phone background, and got back to work. The Coltech Aerospace campus sprawled across 43 acres in Marietta, Georgia, a complex of glass and steel buildings where Marcus had spent the better part of a decade designing propulsion systems that redefined what was possible in orbital mechanics. The main lobby featured a scale model of the CS-7 engine that had won the Defense Department contract, its titanium components polished to a mirror finish, a monument to precision engineering and relentless iteration. Marcus arrived at 2:30, giving himself time to prepare before Devin Crawford's 3 o'clock appointment. Security had the young physicist's name on the visitor list, and Marcus had instructed them to treat him with the same courtesy they'd show a board member. First impressions mattered, especially when someone had already been conditioned to expect mistreatment. He was reviewing Devin's incident file when his assistant knocked. "Mr. Cole, your 3 o'clock is here, 15 minutes early." "Send him up." Devin Crawford looked younger than 26, his frame thin in a way that suggested either genetics or the kind of poverty where food became optional. He wore jeans and a MIT hoodie, the irony wasn't lost on Marcus, and carried a backpack that had seen better years. His eyes scanned the office with the hypervigilance of someone who'd learned to catalog exits and assess threats before relaxing into any space. Marcus stood, extended his hand. "Devin, thank you for coming." The handshake was firm but brief, Devin pulling back quickly like he wasn't sure physical contact was safe. He didn't sit until Marcus gestured to the chair, and even then he perched on the edge rather than settling in. "You're really him, the guy who owns Skylight now." "I really am. And you're really passenger 38, the graduate student who got removed from business class because Captain Richardson decided your visa made you a security risk despite TSA clearance." Devin's jaw tightened. "You read the file?" "I read all 47 files. Yours stood out because you never filed a formal complaint. You just accepted it." "What was I supposed to do? I'm on a student visa. I'm in this country on borrowed time, waiting for my green card application to process. You think I'm going to pick a fight with an airline and risk getting flagged as a troublemaker? Risk deportation over a seat on a plane?" The fear in his voice was visceral, the kind that came from living in a system where one wrong move could collapse your entire future. Marcus understood it intellectually. He'd studied immigration policy, knew the statistics on visa revocations, recognized the precarity that shaped every decision for people like Devin. But hearing it articulated so starkly, seeing the way Devin's hands trembled slightly as he spoke, made the abstraction concrete. "You shouldn't have had to make that calculation. The fact that you did, that you weighed your right to fair treatment against your immigration status and decided you couldn't afford to fight back, that's exactly why systematic reform matters." Devin laughed, bitter and sharp. "Systematic reform. You sound like a consultant. You know what reform looks like to me? It looks like getting kicked off my flight, having to book a last-minute ticket on a commercial airline that cost 3 times what I'd paid for the charter, and then spending 6 months looking over my shoulder wondering if Skylight had reported me to ICE as a security concern. Did they? I don't know. That's the thing about being on a visa. You never know what's in your file, what some random person decided to report, what automated system flagged your name. I just know that 2 months after the incident, my green card interview got delayed. Could be coincidence, could be retaliation. I'll never find out. Marcus made a note on his tablet. What was the captain's name again? Richardson. Captain William Richardson. White guy, maybe 55, had this way of talking to me like I was stupid or lying even though I showed him every document he asked for. He kept saying my visa didn't look right, even though it's a standard F1 student visa, literally the same format as thousands of other international students. Did he explain what didn't look right about it? No. Just kept saying he had security concerns and that he couldn't allow me to fly until those concerns were resolved. I asked how to resolve them. He said I'd need to contact Homeland Security and get additional clearance. I told him I'd already been through TSA, already been cleared by the same Homeland Security he was citing. He didn't care. Marcus pulled up Richardson's personnel file. The captain was still employed. He'd been on vacation during the Nassau incident, had missed the initial wave of terminations. His record showed 22 years of flying, no safety incidents, 3 customer complaints over the past 18 months. Marcus opened the complaints, read them quickly, felt his blood pressure rise. All 3 complaints were from passengers with foreign-sounding names. One was a naturalized citizen born in Lebanon. One was a Canadian businessman of Indian descent. One was Devon. Richardson had a pattern, and nobody had connected the dots because the complaints had been filed separately, handled by different customer service representatives, resolved with vouchers and apologies that never addressed the underlying behavior. Richardson still works for Skyalite. He's flying a route to Dallas tomorrow. Devon's face went pale. You're going to fire him too? I'm going to investigate first. If the pattern holds, and I think it will, then yes, he's gone. But I want to do this right. I want documentation that's so thorough, there's no room for him to claim this was a misunderstanding or a personality conflict. You willing to make a formal statement? What does that involve? You sit down with our new passenger advocate, Rosa Martinez. You tell her exactly what happened, in as much detail as you remember. She records it, has it transcribed, you review the transcript and sign it. Then it becomes part of the official investigation file. If Richardson disputes his termination, we present your statement along with the other complaints and let him explain why 3 passengers with foreign backgrounds all had security concerns while 0 white passengers did. Devon was quiet for a long time, his eyes fixed on something distant. When he finally spoke, his voice was smaller. What if he comes after me? What if he decides I'm the reason he got fired and he reports me to immigration? Marcus felt the weight of promises he might not be able to keep pressing against his chest. He couldn't guarantee Devon's safety from retaliation, couldn't control what a bitter ex-employee might do out of spite, but he could offer something more concrete. I have attorneys who specialize in immigration law. If Richardson or anyone else tries to weaponize the immigration system against you for telling the truth, we'll fight it. We'll provide legal representation at no cost to you. We'll make sure your green card application proceeds without interference. And if it comes to it, we'll go public with what happened and make it very clear that any retaliation is illegal witness intimidation. You'd do that for someone you don't know? I'd do that because it's right. And because if I want 47 people to trust that reform is real, I need to prove that speaking up won't destroy their lives. You're a test case, Devon. What happens to you sends a signal about whether this is safe. Devon pulled a notebook from his backpack, spiral-bound and filled with handwritten physics equations. He flipped to the back pages where the equations gave way to narrative. I wrote it all down. The day it happened. Everything Richardson said, everything I felt, how the other passengers stared at me like I was a terrorist. I've been carrying this for 2 years, adding to it every time I remember something new. He handed the notebook to Marcus, and the gesture felt sacred somehow, like a transfer of burden that had been too heavy for one person to carry alone. Marcus paged through it, reading Devon's account in his cramped handwriting, seeing the incident reconstructed with scientific precision. This is detailed, more detailed than most incident reports I've seen from professional investigators. I'm a physicist. We're trained to observe carefully, to note variables, to reconstruct events from evidence. I figured if I ever got the chance to do something about what happened, I'd need proof. Otherwise, it's just my word against a captain with decades of experience. Marcus closed the notebook carefully. Can I have Rosa transcribe this? We'll return the original to you, but I want this in the official record. Keep it. I don't need it anymore. I know what happened. Having it written down was about making sure I didn't gaslight myself into thinking it was less bad than it was. Now that you're taking it seriously, I don't need the reminder. They talked for another hour. Devon shared details about his research, quantum field theory applications to propulsion systems, work that was theoretical now but might revolutionize spacecraft design in 20 years. Marcus found himself genuinely interested, asking technical questions, discussing the overlap between Devon's research and Coltech's engineering challenges. Somewhere in the conversation, Devon's posture changed. His shoulders dropped from their defensive hunch. His hands stopped fidgeting with his backpack straps. He made eye contact more frequently, held it longer, stopped scanning for exits. You know what's weird? Devon's voice carried a note of discovery. This is the first time I've talked about the incident and felt like the person listening believed me without needing proof. Usually there's this skepticism, this need to verify every detail before they'll accept that maybe, possibly, the captain was wrong and I was right. You just believed me. I read 46 other files that told the same story with different details. At some point, skepticism stops being due diligence and starts being complicity. I'm past that point. Devon nodded, processing. So what happens now? You fire Richardson, I give my statement, and then what? Does the system actually change, or do they just get better at hiding it? The question cut to the heart of what Marcus had been wrestling with since buying Skylight. Firing bad actors was necessary but not sufficient. Cultural transformation required changing the incentive structures that had allowed those actors to thrive, rebuilding systems from assumptions up, making it harder to discriminate than to treat people fairly. The system changes if we build accountability into every level. That means quarterly bias training that's actually rigorous, not just checking a box. That means passenger advocates with real power to investigate and discipline. That means public reporting of diversity metrics so customers can see whether we're keeping promises. And it means people like you being willing to come forward when things go wrong, because sunshine is the best disinfectant. You're quoting Brandeis. Marcus smiled. I did go to college, despite what Captain Hartwell assumed. Where'd you study? MIT, same as you. Mechanical engineering undergrad, aerospace graduate work. Graduated 2007. Devon's eyes widened. You're an MIT engineer who became a billionaire in aerospace. You're living the dream every grad student has. I'm living one version of it, but the dream costs more than people tell you. My wife died 4 years ago. I have an 8-year-old daughter I'm raising alone. I work 80-hour weeks trying to run 2 companies and still make it home for dinner. The money matters because it buys options, but it doesn't buy time and it doesn't bring back the people you lose along the way. The honesty seemed to surprise Devon, like he'd expected corporate platitudes instead of grief. I'm sorry about your wife. Thank you. She's part of why I'm doing this. Sarah believed the world could be better if people with resources used them for something beyond accumulation. She'd have liked what we're trying to do at Skylight. Devon stood, offered his hand again, and this time the handshake was steady. I'll make the statement. And if you need me to testify, to go public, whatever helps, I'll do it. Not because I think it'll fix everything, but because staying quiet didn't protect me. So maybe speaking up will protect somebody else. After Devon left, Marcus sat in his office watching the sun angle through the windows, painting the propulsion model in amber light. His phone buzzed with a message from Rosa. Richardson just filed a complaint against you. Claims you're creating a hostile work environment. His union rep is involved. Marcus typed back. Schedule a meeting with Richardson, his rep, and our attorneys. Tomorrow, if possible. Time to see what he's really made of. The meeting convened at 9 a.m. in Skylight's main conference room. Captain William Richardson arrived with his union representative, a woman named Patricia Valdez, who'd spent 30 years defending pilots against disciplinary actions. They sat across from Marcus, Rosa, David Chen, and Skylight's new HR director, a man named Jerome Williams, who'd been hired specifically for his expertise in workplace discrimination cases. Richardson was tall, fit, with the kind of confidence that came from never having his authority seriously questioned. He wore his uniform despite being off duty, a power move designed to remind everyone of his rank and experience. Patricia carried 2 briefcases worth of documentation, ready for battle. Mr. Cole, my client is here under protest. He believes this meeting is retaliatory in nature and designed to intimidate him for exercising his right to report workplace concerns. Marcus kept his voice level. Captain Richardson filed a complaint alleging I've created a hostile work environment. I'd like to hear the specifics of that allegation so we can address it properly. Richardson leaned forward. You've spent the past week firing experienced employees, publicly humiliating a decorated captain, and spreading accusations of racism without evidence. You've created an atmosphere where pilots are afraid to make legitimate security decisions for fear they'll be labeled bigots. That's hostile, and it's affecting our ability to do our jobs safely. What security decisions are you afraid to make? Any decisions involving passengers who don't fit standard profiles. If someone's documentation looks questionable, if their behavior raises red flags, we should be able to act without worrying that we'll be terminated for protecting the aircraft. Rosa pulled out a file, slid it across the table. Captain Richardson, these are your passenger interactions over the past 3 years. 23 documented instances where you questioned passenger credentials. 17 of those passengers were people of color. 14 had foreign-sounding names. 6 were international students on valid visas. The 7 white passengers you questioned all had actual documentation irregularities, expired IDs, names not matching tickets, payment disputes. The 16 passengers of color you questioned all had valid documentation that you chose to doubt anyway. Can you explain that pattern? Richardson's face flushed. I make security assessments based on years of experience. Sometimes documentation looks irregular even if it's technically valid. What makes a valid F1 student visa look irregular? Marcus interrupted. Devin Crawford showed you a visa issued by the U.S. Department of State, stamped and verified. You told him it didn't look right. What specifically was wrong with it? I don't recall that specific incident. Then let me refresh your memory. Jerome Williams opened a laptop, turned it so Richardson could see the screen. This is Devin Crawford's written account of the incident, which occurred on March 15, 2023. He documents showing you his passport with a valid F1 visa, his I-20 form from MIT, his TSA pre-check confirmation, and his government-issued driver's license. You told him you had security concerns and removed him from the flight. He missed an important academic presentation and had to book a last-minute commercial ticket at significant personal expense. What security concerns did his valid documentation raise? Richardson shifted in his seat. Look, in the post-9/11 environment, we have to be vigilant. Student visas have been used as cover for what? Marcus's voice dropped to something colder. Say it clearly, Captain. What were you concerned a graduate student in physics from MIT might do on a charter flight to Atlanta? The silence stretched. Richardson's mouth opened and closed, searching for words that wouldn't incriminate him further. Patricia stepped in. My client is not required to justify his professional judgment in every instance. Pilots have broad discretion to make security assessments and second-guessing those assessments after the fact. I'm not second-guessing one assessment. Marcus pulled out the full complaint file. 17 incidents documented with times, dates, passenger names, outcomes. I'm identifying a pattern of discriminatory behavior disguised as security protocol. Captain Richardson questions passengers who look or sound foreign. He accepts documentation from white passengers at face value while subjecting passengers of color to additional scrutiny. That's not security assessment. That's profiling. Richardson stood abruptly. I've served this company for 22 years without incident. I've flown through war zones. I've handled medical emergencies. I've kept passengers safe through weather that would have grounded lesser pilots. And now you're going to destroy my career because some kid with a victim complex filed a complaint? The mask had slipped. The careful language about security concerns gave way to raw defensiveness, and Marcus saw the calculation happening in Richardson's eyes, the realization that this meeting wasn't going his way, that the union couldn't protect him from documented evidence, that his career was ending not with honors, but with humiliation. Sit down, Captain. Marcus didn't raise his voice, but the command in it was absolute. Richardson sat, and something in his posture collapsed. You're not being fired because Devin Crawford filed a complaint. You're being fired because 17 people over 3 years reported the same pattern of behavior and the previous ownership ignored it. You're being fired because when given the opportunity to explain your actions, you doubled down on profiling instead of acknowledging error. You're being fired because this company deserves better than pilots who see passengers as threats based on accents and visa status. Patricia tried one more defense. Mr. Cole, terminating an employee with Captain Richardson's seniority and safety record sets a dangerous precedent. It suggests that one area of concern can override decades of exemplary service. Decades of service don't excuse bigotry. They make it worse because it means the bigotry had more time to cause harm. Marcus turned to Richardson directly. You want to know what's dangerous? Letting pilots like you continue flying because we're afraid of the precedent that accountability might set. That's what created this mess in the first place. He slid the termination letter across the table. You're dismissed effective immediately. You'll receive 2 weeks severance and your pension contributions will be honored. Your union can file the grievance if they believe the termination was unjust, and will present this evidence in arbitration. But your days flying for Skylight are over. Richardson took the letter with shaking hands. For a moment, Marcus thought he might tear it up, might storm out with defiant proclamations about lawsuits and vindication. Instead, he just stared at the paper, and when he finally spoke, his voice was hollow. I was protecting people. That's what I thought I was doing. The admission hung in the air, devastating in its sincerity. Richardson genuinely believed he'd been serving security rather than prejudice, had convinced himself that his instincts were honed by experience rather than shaped by bias. He'd built a career on that belief, and now it was crumbling into evidence that his instincts had been wrong, systematically and harmfully wrong for years. Then learn from this. Marcus's voice gentled slightly, not out of sympathy, but out of recognition that destruction without instruction was just cruelty. Learn that good intentions don't excuse discriminatory outcomes. Learn that your assumptions about who poses a threat are shaped by culture, not reality. Learn that protection that only extends to people who look like you isn't protection. It's privilege masquerading as safety. Richardson stood, gathered his things, walked to the door. He paused at the threshold, turned back. The next time something goes wrong, when some pilot misses a real threat because they're afraid to act, that's on you. Marcus met his eyes steadily. If a pilot can't distinguish between legitimate security concerns and racial profiling, they shouldn't be flying commercial aircraft. We'll hire better pilots. After Richardson and Patricia left, Rosa exhaled like she'd been holding her breath underwater. That was harder than I expected. He really believed he was right. The true believers always do. That's what makes them dangerous. Marcus closed the files, suddenly exhausted. How many more like him do we have? Jerome pulled up a spreadsheet. Based on the preliminary audit, we've identified 12 employees with similar complaint patterns. 8 pilots, 3 gate agents, 1 operations manager. Some are as clear-cut as Richardson. Others are borderline, 2 or 3 complaints that might be coincidence rather than pattern. I want interviews with all 12. I want to hear them explain their decisions, see whether they acknowledge problems or defend them. The ones who defend get terminated. The ones who acknowledge and commit to change get 1 chance with mandatory retraining and quarterly reviews. That's more generous than Richardson got. Richardson got the chance. He used it to argue that questioning foreign students was justified vigilance. The ones who recognize their behavior was wrong and want to fix it. Those people deserve the opportunity. We're not trying to punish everyone. We're trying to build a culture where discrimination doesn't thrive. The audit interviews consumed the next 3 days. Marcus sat through each one personally, listening to employees defend or acknowledge their behavior, watching the cognitive dissonance play out in real time. Some cried, some got angry. 2 resigned rather than face investigation. 3 made genuine apologies and committed to change with what felt like real conviction. By the end, Skylight had terminated 18 employees total, 7 pilots, 4 gate agents, 3 operations managers, 2 customer service representatives, 1 senior executive, 1 training director. The company was bleeding experience, and Marcus knew the short-term operational impact would be significant. But the alternative was continuing to employ people who treated paying customers as threats, and that cost couldn't be calculated in delayed flights or training expenses. Rosa scheduled a company-wide meeting for Friday afternoon, every employee who could attend in person gathering in the main hangar, others joining via video conference. Marcus stood on a makeshift stage in front of a Gulf Stream, the same model he'd been humiliated on a week earlier, and looked at 300 faces trying to determine whether he was the company's savior or its destroyer. A week ago, I sat on a jump seat in the galley of this aircraft for 6 hours. I was put there because Captain Linda Hartwell and a passenger named Devin Ashford decided I didn't belong in first class. They made that decision based on how I looked, not on any legitimate operational concern. Some of you might think that was one bad day, one captain's error in judgment. It wasn't. He pulled up the statistics on the screen behind him. 47 documented cases, percentages showing the racial breakdown of passengers questioned versus passengers accepted without scrutiny, the settlement amounts paid over 3 years. This was systematic. This was cultural. This was the company deciding that profitability mattered more than dignity, that settlements were cheaper than accountability. I bought Skylight to change that equation, but I can't do it alone. I need every person in this room to commit to treating passengers the way you'd want to be treated, with respect, with fairness, without assumptions based on skin color or accents or where their passport was issued. A hand went up in the back. Marcus nodded for the question. Mr. Cole, you've fired 18 people in a week. How are we supposed to do our jobs when you've gutted the experienced workforce? The question was fair, and Marcus had been expecting it. We're hiring, aggressively. We're recruiting pilots from commercial airlines who want to transition to private aviation. We're bringing in gate agents from companies with better diversity records. We're promoting from within wherever possible. People like Rosa Martinez, who've been documenting problems for years and deserve the chance to fix them. It's going to be hard for a few months. Flights might get delayed. We might have to turn down charter requests we don't have crews for. But in 6 months, we'll have a workforce that shares our values, and that's worth the short-term pain. Another hand. What about the passengers you've flagged as victims? Are they going to sue us? Some might. We've established a $5 million restitution fund specifically to compensate them without requiring lawsuits. Every one of the 47 documented passengers will receive a formal apology, their settlement money returned with interest, and an invitation to share their story as part of the official record. We're not fighting them. We're trying to make them whole. A third hand, this one from a younger flight attendant Marcus didn't recognize. I've worked here for 2 years. I've never seen anything like what you're describing. Does that mean it didn't happen, or does it mean I wasn't paying attention? The honesty in the question deserved an honest answer. It means you probably weren't in a position to see it. If you're not the target of discrimination, it's easy to miss even when it's happening right in front of you. But I'd encourage you to talk to your colleagues of color. Ask them about their experiences. Listen to what they've been trying to tell people for years. You'll be surprised how much you've missed. The meeting lasted 90 minutes. Marcus answered every question, deflected no challenges, admitted uncertainty where he had it. By the end, he couldn't tell whether he'd won the room over or just deepened the divisions. But he'd been clear about expectations, about values, about the company Skylight would become, whether current employees liked it or not. That evening, Marcus flew commercial back to Atlanta, middle seat, economy class, anonymous among families and business travelers. The flight attendant didn't recognize him. The plane hit turbulence over Alabama, and he gripped the armrests like everyone else, trusting pilots he couldn't see. When they landed, his phone lit up. Maya's face filled the screen, gap-toothed grin, holding her model airplane next to a poster board titled "How We Fly, The Physics of Dreams and Dignity." Her voice message played, "Daddy, I added something to my project about you and the 47 people, about how science can't fix mean people, but brave people can. Are you coming tomorrow?" Marcus typed back with fingers that trembled slightly. "Front row, baby girl, always. Bigger than the sky." He caught an Uber home, the driver's soft jazz filling the silence, Atlanta's lights streaking past the window. His phone buzzed again. This time, David Chen with updates on 3 new lawsuits filed that afternoon. Devin Ashford's defamation claim, Linda Hartwell's wrongful termination, a class action from former employees alleging hostile work environment. Marcus read them without anxiety. Let them come. He had documentation, recordings, witness statements. He had Rosa's 6 years of evidence and Devin's physicist-precise notebook and Angela's photographs. He had 47 stories that couldn't be buried anymore. But more than that, he had Maya waiting at home with a science project about flying higher than prejudice could reach. He had the memory of Sarah's voice. Change the world she inherits. He had 18 empty positions at Skylight that would be filled with people who understood that dignity wasn't negotiable. The work wasn't finished. It was barely started. But the foundation was poured, and the structure would rise from it. Someday Maya would walk into any room, any airplane, any opportunity, without wondering if someone was measuring her worth by the color of her skin, instead of the content of her character. That future, fragile and uncertain as it was, felt like the only thing worth building.